Welcome into the Hot Read Podcast live here on Friday, December the 13th. Oh, Stoney, yet another Friday the 13th. Why do we have so many Friday the 13th shows? I don't get it, but here we are. I just noticed that, but maybe it's a little festive, Friday the 13th. Nonetheless, I am your host, JT Ruhnke, reporter and writer here at Broadway Sports Media. You can follow me over on Twitter at JT_Ruhnke. And I'm once again joined on a Hot Read Happy Hour Friday by none other than Stoney Keeley, editor-in-chief over at Sobros Network, one half of the newly vamped, having a bunch of couch F-words.
Studio pod. F-words.
Yeah. I mean, the F-words casting couch looked amazing last night. I have to give you a shout out here. And then also a co-writer over on Stacking the Inbox. Stoney, how are you doing on this Hot Read Happy Hour Friday?
I'm going to crash, JT. I'm running on like 4 hours of sleep, and I never know how these shows are going to go. Sometimes they're the best shows that I do. Sometimes I don't. It makes me wonder why people even tune in, but we're going to try and get through it today.
Yes, hey, we're here talking about football, and any day that we do get to talk football is a good day in my book. Anyways, it is a happy hour Friday here, and we are always brought to you by Sinkers Beverages and Bluegrass Beverages, especially on this Hot Read Happy Hour Friday. How many times can I say that in the span of 2 minutes? Thank you to our wonderful and amazing sponsors, Sinkers Beverages and Bluegrass Beverages. If you know 440 Sports, you know them. If not, and you're new around here, happy to introduce you later on in the show. And if you are joining us live, like so many of you here are, like Eddie and Zach and another Zach Lyons, who I'm sure is just here to dump on Easton, and then he'll scurry away to other important things. And then, of course, Lewis Chesney, who says he's disliking the show and he's reporting the show after we put him in timeout. It seems that he did not learn his lesson. I don't know if he's still here, but either way, Zach Riley saying we out here. Eddie saying chat starting out hot today.
It is on fire.
If you want to join this hot read, hot conversation, head on over to Broadway Sports Media or 440 Sports YouTube channel, where you can join the conversation over there. And, speaking of Zach Lyons, he does a wonderful radio show over on 104.5 The Zone called Cover 2 with Blaine and Zach, except today, I believe it was Zach Lyons and B-Hop, Brad Hopkins over there today. And they decided to, they talk a lot of football over there and they do a lot of great things. But the one thing that they really said today that almost had me acting like Lewis Chesney, reporting the show, disliking it, doing everything like that, is how they slandered Skyline Chili over on the radio today. And I just wanted to take a quick second here as a Cincinnati native and now Nashville sports reporter to kind of just clear the air on a few things about Skyline Chili. And you can have your opinions on it. It's okay. Your opinions are wrong, because Skyline is probably the greatest thing that was ever created on this God-given green earth. But here are a couple things. One, I don't know. B-Hop's take on Skyline, I just immediately threw into the trash. There is no Skyline Chili in Atlanta. Like maybe he said it was during the Super Bowl, and I guess maybe Cincinnati and the Rams played during the Super Bowl down there, which means maybe it was a pop-up, but no, there are no Skyline Chili restaurants in Atlanta. So whatever he was watching, whatever he was eating was not real Skyline, for one. So that's one thing I will say about what they said. And Zach wants to come in here and say Skyline Chili sucks. Here's my review. It sucks. It's a watery, oily sludge that's slathered over a mound of limp spaghetti. They don't even brown the beef. And here's where I will maybe concede on this argument just a little bit. I agree with you, Zach, that Skyline Chili is not chili. And this is something that I've had to learn over the years, because as I've learned from one of my great friends back in Cincinnati, who I trust on his opinions on chili and whatnot, because he is the fourth generation owner of a chili franchise in Cincinnati. He also agrees that it's not real chili, and instead it's more how he describes it as a Greek bolognese sauce. which apparently is a real thing that way back when the Greeks used to indulge in their Skyline chili, what we know nowadays. They wouldn't put cheese on it, but it was more or less the same thing that you get now in Cincinnati today. Now, they've, over the years, of course, made it so much better by putting it on those delicious noodles and just mounds of delicious cheddar cheese that, oh my God, it's so good if you just sit down in a restaurant and eat it. It is so good. But, you know, here's my thing, right? If you haven't gone to your local suburban Skyline chili in the suburbs of Cincinnati, sat down with your friends and just had a hearty homemade, not really homemade, but bowl of Skyline chili there with your buddies, then I don't think you have a lot to say on the topic. And I know that Stoney, I know you had the opportunity as well to try it once. However, I will push back on your opinion of it as well, because you got it to go, which I think, unless you are a true Cincinnati native, is probably not the way you want to experience your first Skyline.
Hold on. I was staying 5 minutes down the road. It was a 5-minute drive from the Skyline chili to the hotel. And I walked right into the lobby, sat at a table in the hotel lobby and ate it. It can't congeal that much in 5 minutes.
Right, but every person in Cincinnati knows that Skyline chili drive-through is not real Skyline chili. So okay. I mean that's a given. I think if I have a couple of my brother is staying in town with me this weekend. I have a few friends staying with me in town this weekend who are here for the Cincinnati Titans game. They get to go get drunk, have fun. I have to cover whatever blowout mess we're about to talk about. Just like apparently Skyline chili blows Zach out, if you know what I mean.
Excuse me.
But like they would tell you that Skyline chili, when you sit down and you eat it, it is delicious, and when you get it to go, it's not exactly the same thing. And so, real quick, let's see Zach's response to this. And he says they don't even brown the beef; they boil it. If that weren't enough, it's topped with an avalanche of pale, sweaty, shredded cheese, the kind that doesn't quite melt but sits there stubbornly like a yellowish crown. It's delicious. It's the way it was intended. You don't want melted cheese over your three ways. Hold on.
I got to push back on the cheese, because I noted how disgusting it was that I put cheese on top of my chili, and after a few minutes, I was pulling the spaghetti with the chili up off the plate, and the cheese was falling off of my fork. Like, there's some sort of repellent in it. It's not just that it's like pale and sweaty and sits on the bowl.
Once again, you're not eating it right.
Real food. You're
not eating it right. And that's, it's okay. Baby's first time. If we get a second go around, we'll show you actually how to do it. Zach also says, hey, you know what would make this bolognese better? 2 handfuls of raw onions. Kenneth also apparently believes that Skyline chili is gross. Zach saying, hey, if it's not chili, don't call it chili. I'm still going to, just to continue to make you mad here. And he says, if you have to eat it at the moment it is cooked, then it isn't good. Well, I just want to say that you're wrong, and that it's the greatest thing ever. You're supposed to eat it with a shovel. Yes, if I could shovel Skyline chili into my mouth by the shovelful, I would do it. And maybe that's just me, and maybe I'm a disgusting person. Nonetheless, Stoney, Stoney, you did try it.
I did try it.
Do you want to give a couple tasting notes from yourself? And I do respect your opinion on a lot of things.
There is. I was just about to say you're on an island here, JT, but then Spencer hops in the chat and says it's awesome. He's on your side too. So there you go. You have an ally here. There is a video. There is a video of me eating Skyline chili, trying it for the first time. I went up for the Memorial Day weekend, hit up the Cincinnati Zoo, hit up Jungle Gyms, had a good meal or two in town.
Jungle Gyms, goated.
And and I had to try some Skyline chili while I was there. My wife filmed me eating it, and honest in the moment reaction is what you got from me. And I thought it was rather bland. It tasted like dog food with cinnamon in it. It was grossing me out that the cheese was falling off my fork. Like, it wasn't even, and my food was still hot, and it wasn't even melting into the chili, the spaghetti, whatever you want to call it.
You don't want it to melt into there.
And it was just falling off my fork. So then I was just having to, I was taking a bite of the chili and then taking a bite of cheese.
Oh no. Are you a twirler? Were you twirling it?
Yeah, I was. What?
Oh,
Yeah.
oh
Well, it's
no.
spaghetti.
Oh
It's
no.
spaghetti. So
Dude, you just got to cut it. You have to cut it like this and eat it. That's how see,
mm,
you know, once again, just some just uninformed reviewers here. Zach saying it's served in styrofoam bowl or plate that somehow perfectly complements the unsettling lukewarm mess. It's not styrofoam, it's plastic. So
it kind of tastes like
I,
styrofoam, though.
I once again, I once again am questioning how much Zach really knows about Skyline Chili. Kind of saying JT's feelings look so hurt. Like when we insult British people for beans on toast, maybe this is how I feel about my take on British food as well. Maybe I need to step back and reevaluate my life. But I'm just gonna give the number one chatter here today, Spencer Trilby, for no other reason than thank you for being here, Spencer. We appreciate you as well. Eddie saying really says something. Titans are so bad, we'd rather discuss chili. Chef saying Zach is in the chat. This is longer than Zach's ever been in our chat, so thank you for staying around.
Got him fired up.
We do. And you know what? It's more fired up than I've seen him in a long time, given the state of this Titans team, I would say. But, you know, it is what it is, and I'm glad that we could have this little discussion, lay all the facts out, and continue to see why you were wrong and I'm just incredibly right. And so that's where we are on the matter. Zach saying confirmed. I'll tell every Bengals fan Skyline Chili sucks when we're down 34. And that's exactly where I think we're going to start off today, because this game's really, it doesn't feel like it should have a lot of it shouldn't have a lot of rivalry aspects to it, but over the past couple of years, it really has come to. And I have to point this one out because it's really funny. Zach saying, is that the same person who gave Quentin Bohanna his name? Possibly. Who knows? He may be in witness protection, just like him and Logan Bruss and all the other fine cats that the Tennessee Titans are harboring this season. This game, though, has continued to kind of build on its rivalry and kind of hatred of these two teams, stemming from that game in early January 2022, where the Bengals upset the Titans at Nissan Stadium on their way to a Super Bowl berth in that season. That's where a lot of it started. And then, of course, you go into next year, November 2022, where the Bengals come back to Tennessee. They once again beat the Titans, and you get the famous "Up Yours Tennessee" incident from Ted Karras, where something or another must have clearly fired him up, because that was a very aggressive response in a game that they handled business. Yeah. And the Titans strike back last season in October, where they win 27-3 against the Cincinnati Bengals in what was a blowout in that game. And so now we are all the way here to a game. A team, both these teams now, just like a lot of moving parts have kind of mixed together on both of these teams. Would you agree?
Yeah. And man, I think you can even go back to, I believe it was the 2020 season when the Titans were coming off the AFC Championship run. They were expected to be pretty good. That was the year that, like, the offense was historic, but the defense couldn't stop anybody, and the Bengals were total ass. And yet they played the Titans and got a big upset win, kind of a moment for people to start looking at Joe Burrow like, oh, man, maybe they're starting to turn this thing around. I think there was a sour taste left in Titans fans' mouth, because that was kind of the height of the Titans window with Tannehill, Derrick Henry, and A.J. Brown, and here come the lowly Bengals and upset them. So there's been some bad blood brewing in these two fan bases for quite some time, JT, and I'm kind of a fan of it. Like, I kind of get bored with all the Texans fans, the Colts fans, the Jags fans. I like it when we branch out a little bit and we have some of these out of the ordinary kind of rivalries. But you're right, specifically between these two teams, we're seeing some crossover now. Obviously, Brian Callahan, the head coach of the Titans, coming over from Cincinnati as their OC. We have Cheeto, we have Tyler Boyd. Like, there are some guys, I'm sure there's probably some former Titans on the Bengals roster that we're forgetting. I automatically go back to Quentin Spain damn 67 or whatever it was that Jeffrey Simmons tweeted during that game. Like there's a lot of stuff that's fun about this rivalry. These two teams, there seems to be a sort of pipeline. They're regionally close. There's only a few hours in between each city. I don't know, man. I'm hype. I know the records are not too good between these two franchises, but I think this is going to be a pretty spirited contest on Sunday.
Yeah, it's also just like an interesting microcosm of everything, as the Bengals are the blueprint for what Brian Callahan really wants to do with as the head of his own team. Chef ran in the comments saying Jeffrey Simmons has beef with that entire O-line, and it still stems, I think, even all the way back from then, because Zach says, remember when the Bengals beat the Titans with 5 new offensive linemen, but Vrabel had never had an embarrassing loss before. There's a lot of storied history, I think, with these two teams now over the past couple of years, and like you said, it makes a season where the 3-10 Titans, it gives us a little bit of a boost, because like it or not, spoiler alert, we're going to talk about this game in a little bit here and how I think it may as well just be a blowout by the Bengals, because, I think that this matchup kind of is one-sided on paper, how they're playing right now, a lot of things like that, but it does give us some interesting talking points here. And Dr. Yodel in the chat here saying, Bengals fan here, feels like the rivalry isn't as strong without Vrabel. And I'd push back and say, I think it could only get stronger if Brian Callahan were to go in and at home here, make a stand and upset his former team. Like, I think that, especially with the Bengals now having, I think, a 3% chance to make the playoffs, a must-win game for Cincinnati to keep their playoff hopes alive. If Brian Callahan can, in his first action against his old team and his reunion, welcoming them into Nashville, take care of business, effectively knocking the Bengals out of the playoffs, I think that could, even continue to spin this rivalry into next year and beyond, I think. And so that's something that we asked.
Well, I was just going to say another interesting layer to this is that the Bengals are kind of being considered one of the the archetypes that we're trying to build towards with the Tennessee Titans organization. Everybody cites Zach Taylor's early struggles as a head coach before turning it around, comparing that to Brian Callahan's situation, saying it's kind of the same thing. So if Cincinnati's the model, I think it kind of it gives this game another interesting layer when you're talking about it from like the fan base perspective. It's like, this is what the organization could be, is trying to be, that sort of thing. And so there's just an added element to it as well.
Yeah, I would agree. And it certainly seems like, even though they want to say that it's yet another game, it certainly seems for a lot of these guys like Chido Awuzie that there may be a little extra emphasis on this game. Here's what Chidobe Awuzie had to say about his matchup going up against his former team this week.
Since I know a lot of those guys so well, it's like taking your brother to the one-on-one court and showing him who's the brother, who's the big brother, who's the little bro. So it kind of feels like that type of environment where, like, we're going to compete, but at the end of the day, it's competitive fun. It's like we're supposed to bring out the best in each other in this game. So games like this is definitely – and Tennessee and Cincinnati have a great history too. When I was over there, we saw Tennessee as always like a rival team, so I think that rivalry still kind of exists. So
would see that team as a rival team is something that you definitely know that both teams are thinking about. It certainly makes sense when given the Ted Karras incident 2 years ago or whatever that was.
Yeah.
And so I also think it's just quite funny, a little bit of that cornerback mentality being taking your brother to the one-on-one court, seeing who's the big bro, seeing who's the little bro. That's all well and good, Cheeto, but spoiler alert, you'll be going up against Jamar Chase and T. Higgins this week. Two guys that I think, have been, for the most part, two of the best wide receivers and maybe the best duo this year in the league. And so I think that's a good segue as we move a couple things around here to talk about this Titans versus Bengals game. And the question I want to ask you, Stoney, is there any, I don't think that you can stop Jamar Chase and T. Higgins. Like, I think if you're able to stop one of them, the other one's going to get theirs or vice versa. And it makes them, really hard to defend in that aspect. I think, it's really hard to even take away one of them.
Yeah.
To start. And so I think the only thing that Tennessee can hope to do this week is not stop them, but slow them down and make the Bengals beat them with other facets of their offensive game.
Yeah, it's really interesting because in recent weeks, the Titans have played guys like Justin Jefferson, like Terry McLaurin. They played them a little bit differently, and I'm curious how they're going to cover this Bengals receiving core, because the Commanders, the Vikings, they've got good elite receivers, but they don't have a 1-2 punch quite like these two that we're going to get. All due respect to Jordan Addison, I've never really been a big Jordan Addison fan. Maybe that's just my my draft bias is coming back. I'm not willing to come off that just yet, but I don't know that they have the horses to really run with these guys. And I could easily see it becoming a situation where, a theme we've talked about with this team all season is you plug one hole and another one pops up. So how do you attack this? Do you follow Jamar Chase around? Do you keep him bracketed and wait for T. Higgins to spring loose, or vice versa? I think it's going to be a pretty tough, matchup for this secondary.
Yeah. And so, I think it's going to be interesting. If you had to ask me, gun to my head here, who's going on who, I think you're going to see a lot more support for a guy like T. Higgins this week, which is interesting to say. But when you look at what the Bengals have been doing this year, T. Higgins has been the first read for this team a lot. He has been getting the ball force-fed to him a lot more than Jamar Chase, almost to the point where these teams have had to really, shift their thinking mid-game and try to take away T. Higgins, leaving Jamar Chase open and giving him the opportunity to get those one-on-one matchups. And so I think if the Titans and Brian Callahan and Denard Wilson, all these guys, and Cheeto Awuzie, all these guys who have so much knowledge and so much experience against these guys, I think they know that even with how good Jamar Chase is playing right now, you want to start to try to take T. Higgins away before you really try to get Jamar Chase, because I think the sentiment around the league is that you can only hope to slow down Jamar Chase. So why even try bother, because he's just playing at such an elite level. And so if you had to ask me, I think we would see a lot of Cheeto on T with a lot of help trying to take him away. And then we're going to see Jarvis Brownlee Jr. take on yet another tough task in trying to defend Jamar Chase this week, which speaks volumes, I think, for a fifth-round rookie who, in his first year that we didn't expect him to be playing this much, now will have gone up against the likes of Justin Jefferson, Terry McLaurin, and Jamar Chase this week, and probably a little bit of T. Higgins sprinkled in there as well. That's just it's any way you try to slice it, it's a tough matchup for the young guy.
That's a gauntlet. What's the injury report looking like? Is Roger McCreary going to be healthy for this one? Do you know, JT?
So currently, I believe that Brian Callahan said today that nobody has been ruled out. So At least he's questionable. Now, will he be back this week? It's tough to say, right? But I think if you do get Roger McCreary back as well, that's another avenue, I think, where you see them try to use him to their advantage to take away Jamar Chase as well, playing that slot over the middle, kind of giving that help to a team that is going to have a banged up Otis Reese for sure, because we saw him go down with that ankle injury. Once again, we might see a bunch of Luke Gifford as well. There's going to be a lot of rotating guys here this week. And so having a guy back like McCreary probably would benefit this team a whole heck of a lot.
Yeah, I was thinking McCreary is probably a piece they could probably get creative with in coverage based on the matchups. And then, man, I think it's going to be a big game for the Titan safeties, regardless of who they rotate out there in coverage, coming over to help out against these wide receivers and still staying disciplined against the run. I think that could be one of the keys to the matchup. And obviously, the defensive front creating that interior pressure, linebackers filling gaps against the run. This is going to be one of those games where the discipline is going to have to be there for this Titans defense. if they're going to have any shot of just stopping these guys once or twice to hang in it.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And I think, Chef Rand says here, you have to get physical with a guy like Jamar Chase. But even then, you're still going to lose because he is playing, for my money, the best ball of any wide receiver out there right now.
Yeah.
Here's what Cheeto had to say about going up against T. Higgins, Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase. He even mentions Andre Yoshivach in this list here as guys that, he's played against them a lot in practice over the past couple of years. Does that give him any sort of edge? And here's what he had to say about that.
It helps, but, he's such a great player. Him, T, Yosevas, all those guys, and obviously Joe, they're all great players. So at the end of the day, you can know as much as you want, but they're going to try to get theirs, you know what I'm saying? So it's going to be a dogfight just like any other week, and it's going to be exciting because, these are the type of games that you get up for, high challenge, people that's getting a lot of recognition. It's like, okay, let's see where we're at. So
I think he brings up a good point as well. Let's see where we're at. A team that is 3-10, there are, some thoughts and ideas and things being passed around that this team is on the verge of maybe quitting on the season. It's getting tough. The frustration is starting to boil over. Let's see what we can muster up against a team that on paper is so much better than this Titans team. And
yeah.
I think when you talk about how much the Titans have been able to not execute on offense, that's going to tell the tale of this game, right? Like, as much as they want to try to game plan against T. Higgins and Jamar Chase and these guys, if they continue to kind of not be able to execute like they have, if they go, if they turn it over in the red zone on downs, if Will Levis kind of reverts back and, we saw him go backwards, hopefully he can show us some more positive regression here this week, but it doesn't necessarily mean that he can't go back even further this week. Like, seeing him turn the ball over like that, getting the special teams to a point where, they've been playing good, but can they continue this sustained success? All these things to say, 6 points this week, like a performance like last week with the Jags, is going to leave you losing this game by 35. And, even if they play their most mediocre ball this week where they are scoring points, you just have to you don't have to do too much box score scouting to know that the Bengals currently are averaging 27-ish points per game to the Titans 17.5. And the Bengals have played defenses a lot stiffer than the Titans that are playing right now. Like, the Titans are not playing to the degree that we saw them play earlier this season. And so how do you try to take away some of that explosive capability and kind of stop the bleeding in terms of scoring that the Bengals can offer? And it comes down to ball control for me, Stoney, really. I think if you are going to be able to get anywhere in this game, it's by riding Tony Pollard. It's by, controlling the clock to the best of your abilities while still being able to get downfield and riding, a run game that, to be fair, the Bengals defense is nothing to really, be scared of. They're
on a really tough stretch. They allowed 20 points to the Cowboys, who suck.
Yep.
They allowed 44 points to the Steelers, 34 to the Chargers, 35 to the Baltimore Ravens in their last 4 games. That is not a good stretch.
Yeah, I mean, hey, outside of the Cowboys, a lot of good offenses in there too. And so, I think, if you, which one in there besides the Cowboys would you say is not a great offense?
Oh God, you're gonna dox me. I think the Ravens are a little overrated. I really do.
Okay.
And I don't think the Chargers are really that exciting either.
Interesting. Okay.
It's just bread and butter, boring ass football.
That's true. And so, hey, maybe the Titans are going to be looking to channel some of that as well in this game by playing some boring bread and butter football.
So I'm saying, if it worked for those teams, you're built to do it.
Maybe that is. And, by way of, I think, the Bengals defense this year, the most susceptible that they are is through the run game. They've given up 1,694 rushing yards, 4.5 yards a carry, and they're playing a lot of young, inexperienced guys. And I think that's where Brian Callahan may be able to get the best of these guys. You talk about Jordan Battle, Josh Newton, Chris Jenkins, Miles Murphy. You were talking earlier about how, your draft biases are coming back into play. My draft biases are kind of coming into play here with Josh Newton and Chris Jenkins getting a lot of play. Not something not something that scares me a lot, given where my opinion of them was come draft cycle last year. So, you look at what, we talk about how Lou Anarumo has been this huge defensive minded guru, but we've seen over the past year and a half or so, the talent kind of fall by the wayside for him, and he's just not simply getting the same results. And so if you ask me, it's controlling the clock, getting Will Levis to get that ball out fast, and making, Tony Pollard get into space and make plays, because he has been phenomenal after contact in some of these runs. I think that, to me, is the biggest thing in this game. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, you took the words right out of my mouth. I do think this is a spot where it's not just like do what you do well kind of deal, but I think this offense could use kind of a reset, so to speak. Like, hey, let's remember who we are. Let's remember what we do successfully, and let's execute that and make them stop us. And I do think it's interesting coming off of two incredibly deflating games. Like this game, this rivalry that it's developed into does have some juice. And I kind of wonder if maybe, I don't know, maybe the players need that. Maybe there is some sort of spark to get the motivation going at this point in the season when the playoffs are off the table, the season's over. It's two teams with bad records. Maybe there's some, pride on the line, but it kind of sounds like listening to Cheeto talk. It's like, no, we're juiced up for this. Like, this is a rivalry game. And maybe they need a little bit of that chip on their shoulder. Maybe they do need to have the mentality of like, we got to go out there and play for pride here. And if you do that, I think it's a game where if you're Brian Callahan, maybe you take a step back and you look at the season as a whole, pick apart what you've done well, and let's say, hey, let's go out there and run that early. Let's establish a foundation of success in this game, and let's see what happens in the second half.
Yeah, I think it's a lot of in these games over the past couple of weeks, it feels like if there was any other game that the Titans would stand a chance to maybe cause some chaos and surprise, it's this one, because it seems like when the emotions are high and there's more on the line than just the football, for better or for worse, this team seems to rise to the occasion. And so that's something I think is one of the biggest storylines all week. And so it'll be exciting. I'm interested to see also what the stadium looks like. We saw a couple of weeks ago when the Vikings were in town, how good their team traveled. It was a sea of purple. That's probably what, like 8, 9, 10 hours away from Nashville, maybe
longer drive.
Certainly longer than what Cincinnati is, which is just a quick 4-hour drive down 65. And so if you had to ask me in this game and what the landscape might have it being looking like this week, it may be yet another kind of neutral field game for this Titans team, unfortunately. And so that I think that also adds another kind of element to it, but it'll be interesting to see for sure.
Well, in your opinion, real quick, JT, you've got a pretty good read on the pulse of Bengals fans. Like, what are the vibes like now that the playoffs are such a long shot at this point? Like, is this a team that people are still going to travel for, even if it is just a few hours down the road?
It's tough. Like I did a spot over on Dayton radio yesterday, talking to some of the boys up there about this matchup. And it certainly seems to them, at least, that, hey, 3% chance. So you're saying we have a chance. And I think it's okay. There are a lot of people still holding out hope for this Cincinnati Bengals team because of the expectations. And I think this is something I want to touch on in just a second. But like, this team has so much expectation coming into this year, right? And like T on the franchise tag. the money is only going to get worse and worse for this team to deal with Joe Burrow's contract coming up, with Jamar Chase needing a new deal, all these different things, right? And so it feels like for them to drop an egg and a dud in this season, a season where they will now miss the playoffs for the second year in a row, it feels like people are trying to hold on to any inkling of hope that they can just get into the playoffs and just have a chance with how good this offense is to maybe make some magic. And so when you ask me, between that optic and also just how Nashville is a destination city now and things like that, I wouldn't be surprised if Titans fans show out, but certainly this team is not giving them any reason to right now, which I think could lead to quite a big turnout for Cincinnati Bengals fans, in my opinion.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah, that's where I stand on that. Got to give a shout out to Sinkers Beverages and Bluegrass Beverages, our lovely sponsor of the podcast. Sinkers Beverages, of course, has been serving the East Nashville community for over 40 years. They are a 4-time Best of Nashville Liquor Store of the Year, including this year. And it's for good reason, because they simply have the best selection of beers, wine, and spirits out there in the Nashville area. You got to go over and check it out. And when you do, make sure you sign up for their in-crowd for special benefits, allocations, and bi-weekly tastings that you can only know about when you sign up for their in-crowd. Give them a follow on social media at SinkersBev on Twitter and sinkers.nashville over on Instagram. And if you can't get out there, no worries, they have you covered. Simply search Sinkers on Uber Eats and have the booze delivered to you. Because remember, they drive so you can drink responsibly. Got to give a shout out to Bluegrass Beverages in Hendersonville, who have been serving that location for over 50 years. Thank you to Sinkers and Bluegrass Beverages for sponsoring the show here. Stoney, before we move on to maybe just more of a philosophical topic, I want to talk about the offensive line real quick, because for better or for worse, over the past 2-ish weeks, we haven't really had too big of a problem with what obviously it's not great, but it's not been the reason why this Titans team has been losing games. And so you look at the left side of the line, especially J.C. Latham, who has had 2 down weeks, and he said himself in the locker room and post-game, it's not been his strongest effort. And you kind of have to look at, okay, J.C. Latham has kind of hit a slump, and his slump might be coming at the worst time possible when you consider that he will now be going up against Trey Hendrickson, the league's leader in sacks. He currently ranks second in terms of pass rush win rate, in terms of ESPN's metrics. What, if anything, gives you confidence that maybe this could be a bounce back game for a guy like J.C. Latham?
Well, it is one of those situations where it's, man, he's got quite a bit of tape out there now. People have kind of watched him. I feel like guys are exploiting his weakness to inside counter moves, and that is twofold. One, I think guys are directly beating him inside, and there's a little bit of like panic feet, panic hands going with that, where he's doing the reach and chase thing. But I think people are also showing inside, and he's kind of overreacting to that. And I don't know if it's a thing where it's like he's afraid because now, oh, guys are beating me inside, so now I have to be hyper aware to it. So at the first sign that they're going to cross inside, I got to be ready to jump inside. But he kind of freezes for a moment, and guys fake inside, but then they come outside and they beat him. And there's been a couple of times where like guys are kind of running through his chest a little bit too, which is unusual for him. I tend to think that it is just sort of a rookie wall situation. And I think he's a competitive guy. He's a fiery guy. He's a really strong guy. I think we're still seeing pretty damn good run blocking from J.C. Latham. It's just in these situations where guys are starting to figure out what he is and isn't good at handling right now, and they're just throwing the toolkit at him. Well, if he can start getting his feet beneath him, I don't mean literally, not like from a technique standpoint, just like get your sea legs, right? Get your bearings, so to speak. I think he's going to be okay and have an adjustment to that. It's been a couple of weeks of this, and now I think I want to see him start taking the step to correct those issues and just be a little calmer, I would say. And I think as productive as Trey Hendrickson is, I don't think he's the most explosive guy, twitch, lateral movement kind of guy that JC Latham will have faced. So I think it'll be a big test. I'm not going to say that I have the utmost confidence in either of these tackles to go up against him right now, but it's an opportunity to get better. And I think that's kind of the ground floor of how you have to look at this matchup.
Yeah, I think I'm with you on that one. I will say Trey Hendrickson's not a guy who switches it up between left and right sides of the line. He does it very rarely. So I think it is going to be a big day for JC Latham. But if there were any game for the Bengals to say, let's get you on the other side, it would be this one against MPF, because I would not want to watch that matchup in the slightest. Now, I don't think that's going to happen because, like I said, when looking at his where he lines up and just historically for him, that he's been a right side guy dominantly. Could they move him over? I don't know. Could this be the Myles Murphy breakout game against a guy like MPF and give him a little bit of false box scores stacking here against the guy like MPF? Maybe. I don't know. But that's one thing for certain. I think when I talked about, getting the run game going and getting Will Levis the ball out quickly, it's because you're having some really dominant edge rushers, specifically in Trey Hendrickson, getting after you this weekend. All right. A couple of comments here before we move on. Chef Rand saying, glad Cheeto is back. Can't wait for Snead. Kenneth piling on there and saying, when Snead comes back next year and the Titans get a safety, Titans secondary could be deep next year. I agree a lot with that. Chef Rand also saying 6 points ain't going to get it done, mayonnaise. I also,
well, that's, yeah. And that's just to expand upon that. That's a great point. I think it's, we can look at this Bengals defense kind of struggling right now, giving up a ton of points lately. And we can say, wow, this could be a get right game for the Tennessee Titans. But folks, just a week ago, they went up against the Jacksonville Jaguars defense, the worst pass defense in the NFL, and they mustered 6 points, 2 field goals. So let's not get our hopes up. Okay. It's still going to take a lot of player execution, firing on all cylinders for this team to be competitive this week.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you there. And Eddie, maybe providing some optimism here for you Titans fans rooting for the tank. Panthers win, Titans lose, draft picks cooking. Of course, the Panthers are actually 3.5-point favorites. I think they're 3.5-3-point favorites this week against the Cowboys, which is crazy to me.
What is that, like the first time in 3 years that the Panthers have been favored in a game or something like that?
That's crazy. I'd be interested to hear see what a Titans Panthers line would be this season. I don't want to go down a rabbit hole, but that would just be interesting there. William saying, just got home from work. Hope y'all are both doing well. Very much appreciate you and Stoney putting out good content. Thank you, William. We appreciate that one there. And then we have a bunch of talk about the red zone. Chef Rand just saying red zone. Zach Riley saying, do we think every red zone trip is a Will Levis test? And that's why they throw it every play.
It's a fun conspiracy theory right there.
An interesting conspiracy theory, putting as much damning evidence out there on tape for Will Levis to justify them moving off. I mean, maybe if we put on our tinfoil hat for a second. I do think that's something this week. If they get into the red zone and we see that, I may buy into that line of thinking a little bit more. I don't want to because I think it's dumb, but I could see a world there. Kenneth also saying, I'm looking at the red zone offense. Titans no longer have a red zone threat after Henry and Hopkins are gone. And I would push back to say that why can't Tony Pollard be that red zone threat? I mean, he's been a yards after contact monster this season. If you get him into the red zone, we've seen him inside the 20. Hell, we've even seen him on 3rd and long within the red zone, rush and take off for a long touchdown in there. Like, to see them not utilize Tony Pollard as much in the red zone has been a bizarre development for me this season. Something I think one of my biggest criticisms of a guy like Brian Callahan and his play calling, especially when we've talked a whole heck of a lot about how Will Levis continues to struggle with his processing and whatnot. And so I do think that you still have, a deep threat there with Tony Pollard in the red zone.
Also, Chigakonkwo looks like a pretty damn good red zone target if the quarterback will actually see him.
This is true. I do agree there. Zach saying it's a lack of red zone quarterback, not lack of red zone threats. And so
yeah, I would agree.
I think that's pretty head on there. One more thing before we move on to some best bets and get out of here on a hot read Happy Hour Friday. And if you are joining us here on Twitter or Facebook and want to interact in the comment section like so many of you lovely people are, head on over to Broadway Sports Media or 440 Sports YouTube channels. Give us a like, give us a subscribe over there. Would appreciate it. It helps us grow the channel and get more Titans fans in here, even in a lost season, to talk some Titans football. Always appreciate that. Stoney, there's been a lot of philosophical talk about the Titans and where they're headed and where we are right now with the Titans this week. Of course, Gentry Estes yesterday put out a really great article kind of talking about Amy Adams-Strunk and how she, is guiding the Titans from behind the scenes, not being in the public eye. A really great read. If you haven't, I would recommend going and reading it. And it got me thinking about my take on where the Titans are right now. And obviously with Brian Callahan getting his reunion against Cincinnati, I took it as a spot to write over on Stacking the Inbox my thoughts on how Cincinnati Tennessee has been no secret that they've tried to copy the model of a team like the Bengals. But they may be lacking in areas for it to not actually work out that way. And so, for Cincinnati, I think we talk about the disappointment of this year and how it seemingly is the end of the life cycle for the Cincinnati Bengals to really compete, unfortunately, right? They're off of Joe Burrow's rookie contract. Currently, Joe Burrow seems like he is signaling to the team that he wants T. Higgins and Jamar Chase back, which is going to create a whole heck of a lot of problems when you consider that they currently have T. Higgins and Jamar Chase, and the defense looks like that. How are you going to sign those guys and continue to build up your defense? I don't know. It's really challenging there. And so you look at what they were able to do the first 2 years before Joe Burrow, kind of ascended to where he is now. They were 6-25 before turning the corner, going to 3 straight AFC championships, going to a Super Bowl berth. And then it looks like, unless the Bengals were able to win out and get a lot of help, they're going to be missing the playoffs for a second year in a row. And a lot of these contracts are about to come due for the Bengals. And so it feels like, for better or for worse, the Bengals have sort of missed their window here. And so when you're talking about when you're talking about this Tennessee team and trying to copy a little bit of that, it feels like they might be at the beginning of their own life cycle here in this plan and installing it. They've been 9-21 over their last 2 seasons, ushering in a new era with Rand Carthon. Now that has spanned 2 head coaches, but Rand Carthon has been here. And I think that's the start of a new era for them. But you talk about them trying to make that 3rd year leap, turn the corner, whether that 3rd year is the next upcoming year or the year after, they still have a lot of problems that the Bengals did not. And for me, the first one is the quarterback. The Bengals certainly do not have a Joe Burrow right now. They have a Will Levis, and this was one of the biggest things. Will Levis and Joe Burrow could not be farther apart right now in who they are and the quarterback play that we see out on the field. And so I wrote about this season, if Brian Callahan does make it to a second off season and they continue to retool this team towards 2025 and beyond, he has a big choice to make coming into this off season. Do you hitch your wagon to a guy like Will Levis, or do you hitch your wagon to the idea that we need a little bit more time than the clock it has right now to get our quarterback and start building this around what I want to build? And so I think that's the choice here that Brian Callahan ultimately has to make. Will he get time to make that decision? I don't know, because the second thing that the Titans have really lacked is patience. And it comes down to the owner, Amy Adams-Strunk, and what she's been able to display over the past 2 or 3 years, kind of becoming judge, jury, and executioner, carrying out these personnel decisions for the front office. obviously this season looks like it's headed towards a path, that is a worse outcome than what Mike Vrabel's 6-11 season was last season. How does Amy Adams-Strunk react to that? I think that this team ultimately will have patience because they've learned. However, we've come to know that is not Amy Adams-Strunk's, resume. That is not what she's done in the past. Now, has she changed? Maybe. We don't really know. We don't get to talk to her or Rand Carthon or any of these guys. We get to talk to Brian Callahan. And it's unfair to say that Brian Callahan's on the hot seat and that he's deserving of all of this criticism here, right? But that's just what we have handed to us. And so I think that's the biggest thing right now. If you want to try to follow this Bengals, blueprint, you got to get your quarterback, and Amy Adams-Strunk has to have patience with, I guess, Brian Callahan and also Rand Carthon. Now, I think Rand Carthon's patience may be running a little thin. You have to remember that this is his third draft cycle. We talked about this a little bit on Tuesday's show. It feels like this draft cycle coming up is finally the one where Rand Carthon has to knock it out of the park because the excuses of John Robinson's poor management of the draft and the roster kind of have faded away now. Rand Carthon has worked for 2 years to get it back to a point where he can start adding on talent to make this a contender. It feels like this has to be the draft season this season. And so until we see those things play out, I'm not sure how well Tennessee could follow in the footsteps of Cincinnati. Would you agree with that? Or do you have any thoughts on how they have continued to build their future?
Yeah, I think we can get in trouble comparing situations. I do think we have to be a little more open-minded to potential solutions. We can't just say, let's do what Cincinnati did. Let's do what Detroit did, that sort of thing, like from a planning standpoint. So I think with that in mind, I think people get caught up in this idea that, oh, you've got to have like a Patrick Mahomes, you've got to have a Joe Burrow, you've got to have a Josh Allen, a Lamar Jackson to win a Super Bowl in this day and age. And I just don't know that I necessarily buy into that. Like you can win games with just competent quarterback play and like the steady Eddies out there. I love the middle class of like Jared Goff. Jared Goff is like one of my favorite quarterbacks to watch.
Matt
just
Stafford
because Matthew Stafford. Yeah. Like
what Sam Darnold's doing this year.
Yeah. Even a guy like Baker Mayfield. Like I love like these gritty, tough guys that just get in there. They're confident. They know their system. They know what to do. And they do it. You could probably call like Brock Purdy in that class as well, but those types of guys, like, if you go into this draft looking for Patrick Mahomes and Joe Burrow, you're going to be disappointed because that guy's just not there. But I don't think you need one of those caliber guys to start turning this thing around. I think you probably just need better than Will Levis. And is better than Will Levis going to be available? Yeah, I think so. I don't know whether or not they're going to be in a position to draft Shedeur Sanders. I don't know if they're going to be in a bidding war for Sam Darnold, but I do think the options are out there. So I don't think that is necessarily as far away as people think. I think it's kind of unwise to bank your future on finding one of those guys too. Like if that's your starting point and say, we've got to get a Patrick Mahomes, we've got to get a Joe Burrow, I think it's going to be difficult to do that in any draft class. So I think you've just got to stabilize the position a little more and maybe find a guy that can actually go out and manufacture some offense for you. I think that's possible in this offseason. And it segues into what I want to say about Brian Callahan hitching his wagon to Levis. The way this season has gone, okay, if the Titans had been more competitive, won more games, maybe they come up just short of getting into the playoffs, I think people probably feel a lot better going into 2025, ownership included. But I think for this record to be as bad as it is, I think it's reasonable to think that ownership is looking at this saying, oh, wow, are we sure we did the right thing? At the very least, I'm not saying they're not going to be committed to this turnaround, to this rebuild. I'm not saying that they're not going to have patience, but I think the season has been worse than any of us expected it to be. And I think that could allow some doubt to creep in. So if that's the case, you know there's somebody out there that can stabilize the quarterback position this offense or this offseason. And you know at a certain point you're going to have to start winning games. I do think it kind of boils down to the simple philosophy of what gives us the best chance to win more ball games. And that is why I don't necessarily think this is going to be the same cookie cutter path that Cincinnati followed for the Tennessee Titans. I think it's much more, I think they're going to be a little more flexible. I think Cincinnati probably, I don't want to say Joe Burrow fell into their lap and that allowed them to build around him, but I'm not going to not say that as well.
Right place, right time. Like it's unfortunate that happens sometimes. Yeah.
Yeah. So, you know, you can't bank on that happening. So you just have to go out there and be smart and be diligent about building the best team that you can around the quarterback that you have. And so I think this draft is going to be a big draft for Rand Carthon, but I also think that this roster has a few less needs than it did a season ago for the long-term projection. So I see growth. And I don't know if Amy Adams-Strunk is out there like grinding the all 22 every week, but if you watch those things, there are reasons for optimism. And I think it would be prudent to keep this coaching staff and allow them to gel together and get another season under their belts. So while I think the parallels between the two franchises would be patience, and I think it would be prudent to show patience here, I think they can get to the same place taking different routes.
Yeah, I think that everything is on the table right now. And above all else, it requires patience. And I think that's the hardest thing that we just simply don't know about the Titans, you know, the inside the building right now. How much patience do they truly have to see this thing come to fruition, especially when you consider how little, you know, this team has shown in the past. And I think that's the biggest thing that we'll have to see in this offseason. But we won't be able to see it come to fruition until said offseason. And I think that's where we'll leave it here. I mean, Eddie also saying in the comments here saying, calling Stafford middle class is wild. Well, A, Zach Lyons would agree with you, so take it up with him. And B, I would say Matt Stafford in his era that he's in now and his age is more towards the middle of the pack with a Jared Goff class. I don't think he's up there with the Josh Allens and Patrick Mahomes and Joe Burrows. Do you disagree with that at all, Stoney?
I will say this. I have always been a Matthew Stafford apologist. I've always been a big
I call
fan
him
of his.
I mean, I would say that he's been an elite at times, but apparently I'm not allowed to say that. So
I think at various points throughout his career, I would have put him in that top 5 caliber quarterback conversation. But I think right now, this season alone, this run that he's on alone, I think it is fair to put him in that second tier, which is ultimately
elite.
Yeah, I was wondering if Zach was still watching. He was going to chime in on that. Yeah, I love Matthew Stafford. I'm not watering down the word.
No, I am. I'm watering down elite apparently because the boomers like Zach think that he can't be elite, and so maybe I'm fence jumping a little or fence hopping here a little. No, I just want to be right, so that's all.
I like Stafford, and I'm gonna cape for Jared Goff too. I don't think people really appreciate that dude has turned it on in Detroit. Man, it took him some time to get there, but his ball placement, anticipation, I fucking love watching that dude play quarterback.
Yeah, I do too. 2 more questions and then we'll get out of here. Adam Bowers saying, what would be better, Levis plus T. Higgins and a first-round right tackle, or Darnold plus a right tackle, or Shadur plus Higgins? A brief way to put it for choices. So it certainly seems like quarterback and wide receiver, quarterback and tackle, or Levis, wide receiver, weapon, and tackle. Do you have an answer? I think
go ahead.
I don't know. I probably would go Darnold and probably not a right tackle. I'd go Darnold and an edge, or Darnold and a receiver. Out of the needs I think that you can find in the draft currently, as I start my evaluation, is that right now where the Titans are going to be picking, I would go edge and wide receiver. And that's where I am right now. I don't think there are a lot of high-end caliber right tackles that you want to be taking in the top 10.
That was going to be my answer too. Darnold and the right tackle draft pick, but he didn't specify which draft pick. So I'm going to say, let's get the guy from Arizona. Let's get Emory Jones Jr. out of LSU, top of the second. I know Missouri's got a good tackle. I haven't watched him quite yet. Anthony Belton, who just accepted his invite to the Senior Bowl, left tackle at NC State. Maybe we can flip him the way we flipped J.C. Latham. There's a crop of guys that I don't know. This is going to sound crazy, JT. I don't know. I don't think I've put this out there publicly yet. I don't know that there is a tackle worth taking in the top 20 of this draft class right now. I'm kind of out on Will Campbell. I'm definitely out on Kelvin Banks. I think they're both going to be guards. I think Tyler Booker and Donovan Jackson are probably the best two offensive linemen I've watched so far, and they're both definite guards. So I'm saying that to say I'm waiting on right tackle until the second round, where you might be able to get one of these guys. The kid from Purdue, I don't know if he's going to kick inside or not, but there's going to be a myriad of options in that spot. With that first pick, man, I'm hoping Abdul Carter, edge rusher out of Penn State, Luther Burden III, the wide receiver out of Missouri. One of those guys. That's kind of where I'm leaning with the first pick right now. And then bring in Darnold and I don't know, maybe draft some competition in the middle, late rounds of this class.
Yeah, maybe a Drew Aller or something like that for Eddie out here.
We're cooking. Don't
right.
get me.
Final
get me
question.
down that rabbit hole.
Final question, and this is one that I saw was floating around the internet because Trevor Sikkema over on NFL Stock Exchange put it out there. Would you? I guess Brandon puts it a different way, but would you trade Jeffrey Simmons straight up for JJ McCarthy and JJ McCarthy Hive? Let's ride into 2025 and beyond. Maybe let's just take it back a step and say, if the gut reaction, I'm telling you right now, the Titans have just sent their first round pick for JJ McCarthy and a first round pick swap. Your thoughts?
JJ McCarthy and a first round pick swap?
Yes. So they would get Minnesota's first pick and the Titans would get this, or the Vikings would get the 7th-ish overall pick.
Yeah, I don't know about that, man. Because I liked JJ McCarthy coming out of the draft, but it was like one of those situations where I'm like, oh, I'm excited to watch him play for someone else, not the Tennessee Titans. So I don't know that I'd be willing to roll the dice now. Maybe Penix. You might could talk me into that. I don't know that I would hate that idea.
Interesting. All right. Well, that's where we're going to end it today. That's going to do it for the Hot Read podcast. Thank you to Sinkers Beverages and Bluegrass Beverages for sponsoring the show, as always. And until Tuesday, when we recap whatever madness happens on Sunday between the Cincinnati Bengals and the Tennessee Titans, this has been the Hot Read podcast. We will talk to you then. Have a good weekend.